Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated only to be left speechless when they revealed their true capabilities? Today's story will touch your heart and remind you why we should never judge a book by its cover. If this resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content that celebrates the unsung heroes among us, those everyday people whose extraordinary stories deserve to be told. The hallways of Westfield International Corporation gleamed under the fluorescent lights as Miguel Alvarez pushed his cleaning cart through the executive floor. At 43, his weathered hands told the story of 2 decades spent scrubbing floors, emptying trash bins, and wiping down surfaces that most employees barely noticed. The midnight shift suited him. It meant he could be home when his daughter, Sophia, returned from school. The sacrifice of sleep was nothing compared to seeing her smile when she walked through the door, her backpack heavy with books and dreams that Miguel was determined she would achieve. Tonight was like any other. The executives had left behind their usual mess after a late meeting. Coffee cups with lipstick stains, crumpled papers, and food wrappers scattered across the conference room. The remnants of catered sushi from a high-end downtown restaurant sat abandoned, half-eaten pieces worth more than what Miguel earned in an hour. He worked methodically, his movements efficient from years of practice. He hummed softly to himself, a lullaby he used to sing to Sophia when she was a baby, the melody transporting him momentarily away from the sterile corporate environment to memories of a happier time. The building was eerily quiet at this hour. Miguel could hear the distant hum of the air conditioning system and the occasional ping of the elevator arriving at a floor where security was doing their rounds. He liked the solitude. During the day, the executives and office workers looked through him as if he were invisible, just another part of the building's infrastructure, no more worthy of acknowledgement than the water cooler or the copy machine. At night, at least, he could work with dignity, without feeling the sting of being overlooked. As he reached to empty a trash bin, he noticed a document left on the table. It wasn't unusual for important papers to be forgotten, and Miguel had a system. He'd place them in the center of the table where they'd be easily spotted in the morning. He took pride in this small responsibility, knowing that sometimes these forgotten documents contained time-sensitive information. But as he moved to arrange this one, the header caught his eye. Confidential. Westfield Nakamura merger proposal. Japanese translation required urgently. Miguel paused, his fingers hovering over the document. He knew he shouldn't read it, but the word Japanese triggered something in him. A memory of another life before his wife's death, before he'd become a single father working 3 jobs to make ends meet. For a moment, he was transported back to a sunlit office in Tokyo, surrounded by books and the scent of cherry blossoms drifting through an open window. The sound of laughter interrupted his thoughts. 3 young executives had returned, probably having forgotten something after their meeting. They stopped short when they saw Miguel standing by the table, his hand still poised above the document. Their expensive suits and confident postures contrasted sharply with Miguel's worn uniform and humble stance. "Well, look who's interested in our merger documents," said one of them, a man named Bradley, who had recently been promoted to vice president of operations. His voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone who had never known struggle, who had navigated life on a path paved with privilege and connections. "Doing a little light reading on company time, are we?" "I was just putting it aside for tomorrow," Miguel explained quietly, stepping back from the table. He kept his eyes downcast, a habit he'd developed to avoid confrontation. In his experience, making eye contact with certain types of people only invited more derision. "Sure you were," Bradley smirked, exchanging glances with his colleagues, a woman named Vanessa, who worked in marketing, and another man, Derek, from legal. "I bet you were hoping to get some insider trading tips, huh? Make a fortune on the stock market with your janitor's salary?" The other 2 chuckled, and Miguel felt his cheeks burn. He'd grown accustomed to being invisible in these hallways, but being mocked still stung. It reminded him of the countless small humiliations he'd endured since his fall from academic grace. The dismissive looks from potential employers when they saw the gap in his resume, the pitying glances from parents at Sophia's school when they learned what he did for a living. "I should finish my work," McGill said, turning back to his cart. He reached for his mop, hoping they would lose interest and leave. He still had 3 more floors to clean before his shift ended, and then he needed to catch a few hours of sleep before his morning job, stocking shelves at the local grocery store. Wait, Bradley said, his voice taking on a cruel edge that made Miguel's stomach tighten. "I've got a proposition for you, amigo." He picked up the document and held it out, waving it tauntingly. "See this? It's worth millions to our company. We need it translated into Japanese by tomorrow morning, but our translator is on vacation." Miguel remained silent, his eyes fixed on his cart. He could feel a familiar tension building in his chest, the same feeling he got whenever Sophia asked why they couldn't afford the school trips her friends went on, or when he had to choose between paying the electric bill and buying her new shoes. How about this? You translate this entire document into perfect Japanese, and I'll give you my salary for a month. That's what, about 50 times what you make?" Bradley laughed, his colleagues joining in. "Hell, I'll even throw in a bonus if you can do it by morning. What do you say? Ready to prove you're more than just a guy who cleans up our messes?" The mockery hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Miguel could feel their eyes on him, waiting for his embarrassment, his defeat. He thought about Sophia, about the promise he'd made to her mother as she lay dying, that he would give their daughter every opportunity, no matter what it cost him personally. 30,000 words, Miguel said quietly, his eyes still downcast. "What?" Bradley asked, his smirk faltering slightly. "The document. It's approximately 30,000 words. To translate it properly would take a professional team at least a week." Miguel finally looked up, meeting Bradley's gaze. There was something in his eyes that made Bradley take an involuntary step back, a quiet dignity, a depth of knowledge that seemed out of place in a man wearing a janitor's uniform. "But I can have it done by 8 a.m. Bradley's smile widened, recovering from his momentary discomfort. "Oh, this is rich. The janitor thinks he's a translator now." He slapped the document down on the table with enough force to make Vanessa jump slightly. "You know what? Go for it. If by some miracle you can translate this correctly, my salary is yours for a month. That's a written promise." He scribbled something on a notepad, signed it with a flourish, and tossed it onto the table. "But when you fail, and you will fail, I want you to remember this moment the next time you think about stepping above your station." "I'll need a computer," Miguel said simply, ignoring the barb. Bradley gestured grandly toward a laptop on the side table. "Be my guest. We'll be back in the morning for a good laugh. Come on, guys, let's leave the janitor to his delusions of grandeur." As they walked out, Miguel could hear them still laughing, Vanessa saying something about these people thinking they could do anything. Derek suggested they place bets on how badly Miguel would fail. After they left, Miguel stood motionless for a long moment, their laughter echoing in his mind. Then he carefully set aside his cleaning supplies, washed his hands thoroughly in the executive bathroom, and sat down at the computer. The chair was expensive, ergonomically designed, the kind he'd once had in his university office. He adjusted it slightly, then opened the document and began to read, his eyes moving rapidly across the text. What Bradley and his colleagues didn't know, what no one at Westfield knew, was that Miguel Alvarez was once Dr. Miguel Alvarez Tanaka, a renowned linguistics professor specializing in East Asian languages at the University of Tokyo. He had published 3 books on comparative linguistics and had been a sought-after translator for international business negotiations. His work on the nuances of Japanese business communication had been cited in academic journals around the world. He had lectured at Harvard, Oxford, and the Sorbonne as a visiting scholar. That life seemed like a distant dream now. After his Japanese wife Yuki died unexpectedly from an aneurysm 7 years ago, Miguel had been left alone with their 3-year-old daughter. Overwhelmed by grief and unable to continue working in the environment that reminded him so much of Yuki, he had resigned from his position and moved back to the United States to be closer to his aging parents. His credentials from Japan hadn't transferred easily, and the academic positions he applied for required recent publications and references he couldn't provide. With a young daughter to support and mounting medical bills from Yuki's brief hospitalization, Miguel had taken whatever work he could find. The janitorial position at Westfield offered steady hours and health insurance, a necessity for Sophia, who had inherited her mother's asthma. As the night deepened, Miguel's fingers flew across the keyboard. The technical business language was challenging, but not unfamiliar. He had translated similar documents during his academic career. The merger details were complex, involving manufacturing facilities in Osaka and distribution networks across Southeast Asia. Miguel worked methodically, ensuring that cultural nuances and context-specific terminology were accurately conveyed. At one point, he paused to call Sophia's babysitter, Mrs. Gonzalez, from next door, to check that everything was okay. Sophia had already fallen asleep, Mrs. Gonzalez assured him, after finishing her homework and reading for a while. Miguel thanked her and promised to be home as soon as he could. He felt a pang of guilt, another night when he wouldn't be there to tuck his daughter in, but reminded himself that this opportunity could change everything for them. As he worked, memories of his former life surfaced. He remembered meeting Yuki at an international linguistics conference in Kyoto, how they had argued passionately about the influence of Western languages on modern Japanese. He remembered their tiny apartment near the university, filled with books and the sound of Yuki's laughter. He remembered the day Sophia was born, how Yuki had whispered in Japanese that their daughter would bridge two worlds, two languages, two cultures. The pain of these memories had dulled over time, but never disappeared completely. Miguel had learned to live with it, to function despite it, for Sophia's sake. But tonight, as he immersed himself in the language he and Yuki had shared, the grief felt fresh again. And yet, somehow, there was also a sense of reconnection, as if he were reclaiming a part of himself that had been buried under years of struggle and survival. At 4:30 a.m., he finished the translation. He spent another hour proofreading, making small adjustments to ensure the tone was appropriate for Japanese business executives. He paid particular attention to the sections dealing with hierarchical relationships between the companies, knowing that misunderstandings in this area could derail negotiations. Then he printed 2 copies, one for Bradley and one for himself, and returned to his cleaning duties. By the time the early morning staff began to arrive, the executive floor was spotless, and Miguel was preparing to leave for his second job as a morning stock clerk at a local grocery store. He hadn't slept all night, but adrenaline kept him alert. As he changed out of his janitor's uniform in the small maintenance closet that served as his locker room, he caught a glimpse of himself in the small mirror hanging on the wall. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and gray had begun to streak his once black hair. He looked older than his years, worn down by hardship and exhaustion. But there was something else there, too, a spark in his eyes that had been absent for a long time, a reminder of the man he used to be. Bradley and his colleagues arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, clearly expecting to find Miguel either gone or defeated. Instead, they found him waiting calmly by the conference room, the translated document in a neat folder. He had changed into the clothes he wore for his grocery store job, clean but inexpensive, a far cry from the tailored suits of the executives. "You actually tried to translate it?" Bradley laughed, taking the folder. His hair was perfectly styled, his suit immaculate. He looked like he'd had a full night's sleep and a leisurely breakfast. "This should be entertaining." I completed the translation as requested, all 30,000 words with appropriate business terminology and cultural considerations for a Japanese audience. Bradley flipped through the pages, his smirk fading as he scanned the Japanese characters. Miguel could see confusion and the first flickers of doubt crossing his face. "This could be gibberish for all I know. We'll need to have it checked." "Of course," Miguel agreed. "I believe Miss Watanabe in accounting is from Tokyo. She would be able to verify the quality." Bradley's eyes narrowed. "How do you know Watanabe is from Tokyo?" "She speaks to her mother on the phone sometimes when she works late. Her dialect is distinctive." Miguel didn't add that he had occasionally exchanged pleasantries with Miss Watanabe in Japanese when their paths crossed during his evening cleaning rounds. She had been one of the few employees who actually saw him, who smiled and thanked him for his work. Vanessa and Derek exchanged glances. "Let's get Watanabe," Derek said, his voice tight. "I want to see this janitor's face when she tells us it's nonsense." An hour later, Miguel was called to the office of Catherine Reynolds, the CEO of Westfield International. He had been about to leave for his grocery store job and had already called to say he would be late. His supervisor had been understanding. It wasn't the first time Miguel had needed to adjust his schedule due to his multiple jobs. But Miguel knew that too many such incidents could put his position at risk. He entered Catherine's office nervously, still in his grocery store uniform, to find Catherine seated behind her desk with Bradley standing uncomfortably to one side. Miss Watanabe was there too, holding the translated document, her expression unreadable. Vanessa and Derek hovered near the window, looking tense. "Mr. Alvarez?" Catherine began, her voice measured. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Watanabe has reviewed your translation." Miguel nodded, preparing himself for accusations of cheating or using an online translator. His hands were clasped tightly behind his back to hide their trembling. He thought of Sophia, of the promise he'd made to her that morning before leaving for work, that soon things would get better for them. "She says it's the most accurate and culturally appropriate translation she's ever seen from our company. She was particularly impressed by your use of keigo, formal language, and your understanding of Japanese business etiquette." Catherine leaned forward, her eyes intent on Miguel's face. "She also noted that you included nuances that would be impossible for a machine translation to capture, and that you corrected several factual errors in the original document regarding Japanese regulatory requirements." Miguel remained silent, unsure how to respond. He could feel Bradley's eyes boring into him, a mixture of disbelief and anger from the younger man. "Would you care to explain how our janitor is capable of this level of Japanese translation?" Catherine asked, her tone suggesting she already had some suspicions. "I was a professor of linguistics at the University of Tokyo for 12 years. Japanese is one of the 6 languages I speak fluently. I specialized in business communication and cultural translation." The silence in the room was deafening. Bradley's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Vanessa's mouth had drunk open slightly, and Derek was staring at Miguel as if seeing him for the first time. "And you're working as a janitor?" Catherine asked, her voice softer now, tinged with something that might have been respect. "My wife died 7 years ago. I moved back to the U.S. with my daughter. My credentials didn't transfer well, and Sophia needed stability, health insurance." Miguel shrugged slightly, a gesture that belied the years of struggle and sacrifice behind his words. "I do what I need to do for her." Ms. Watanabe said something in rapid Japanese, her eyes bright with emotion. Miguel responded in kind, his accent flawless, his manner shifting subtly to match the formal register appropriate for a professional conversation. They exchanged a few sentences, Ms. Watanabe becoming increasingly animated. "What is she saying?" Catherine asked, looking between them. Miguel hesitated, but Ms. Watanabe nodded encouragingly. "She says she recognized my name. She studied linguistics at Waseda University and read my books on cross-cultural communication. She's asking why I didn't apply for a position in our translation department." "I wasn't aware we had any openings," Miguel added, glancing at Bradley, whose expression had shifted from anger to something more complex, embarrassment perhaps, or the uncomfortable realization that he had grievously misjudged someone. Catherine nodded slowly, then turned to Bradley. "I believe you made a promise to Mr. Alvarez."